Welcome to the Retail and Consumer Goods Industry Sessions. For our first session, I'd like to introduce Philip Carter, Chief Analyst Europe at IDC.
Hello there, and a very warm welcome to this exciting session where we're going to be thinking about how we reignite the retail sector moving into 2021. My name is Philip Carter. I'm the Chief Analyst for IDC in Europe, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully providing you some insights in terms of how retail organizations can move from crisis response to reignition and the need to create a completely new technology roadmap for their future retail enterprise. Now, in order to do that, I think it's really important to understand what's happened in 2020, which is a real shock to the retail system. And the implications in terms of the supply chain, in terms of the workforce, in terms of changing customer demands is still being felt across all retail subsectors. And what is clear is that the retail sector has actually shone through amazingly well in terms of being able to provide us all, the entire society, with the key products and capabilities that have needed to keep everyone moving forward. And a huge amount of respect and admiration for the frontline staff that have been putting themselves out there every day, putting themselves at risk, the supply chains that have been kept remarkably resilient, dealing with multiple channels and customer demands on an ongoing basis. But in order to really understand the impact on the retail subsector, the retail sector in generally, we need to dig into the details of the subsectors within the broader vertical. So if you look at this chart, what we're trying to do is redraw the subsectors in retail as a result of the shock by looking at this in a bit more granular level of detail. First of all, understand that this is a 5-stage framework where we're looking to help retail organizations move from that crisis to the future enterprise, which is completely technology oriented, and which will underpin the recovery moving forward. But what we've got here is all of the underlying subsectors on the journey towards that future enterprise. And what we've tried to do is to give a sense of what type of trajectory those subsectors are on towards recovery, based on the extent to which that subsector is going through a reset or not. And the difference between something like online-only retail versus eating and drinking establishments or apparel and accessory stores couldn't be more noticeable. And this is part of what we're trying to understand is how these different subsectors are responding to the events of 2020. Now, the size of the bubble there reflects ICT spend in each of those subsectors, and that's important because we do think that moving forward, organizations are going to have to rethink their technology architectures, recreate their digital roadmaps, and really put technology at the heart of the business model moving forward. And that's going to be the basis for moving from response to reignition and igniting a new fire for the retail sector that doesn't take us to the next normal, but actually a better normal. And I think we really need to take into account some of the changes that we've experienced in 2020 in order to be able to do that. And so what I'd like to do is take you through a few what we call retail game changers. And these are going to be in the form of hashtags, just to try and get you to understand what's really impacted the retail sector in 2020. First of all, no surprise, brick and mortar pressure. Now, if you look at the number of store closures, the number of consolidations and divestitures in the retail space, it has been unprecedented in 2020. You look at the risk of dealing with frontline staff, the safety of those frontline staff in those stores. That's also contributed to some of the challenges that store-focused retailers have had to deal with. We also see the rise of dark stores, which are primarily focused on that online subsector or delivering online goods, as an adjacent element of this brick and mortar pressure across the retail sector. Second hashtag is changing spending patterns. So increasingly, You're going to see new market segments moving to online. You're going to see an increasing focus on cashless, so not just credit cards, but also digital payments, an acceleration of digital payments. You see a lot more consumers going green and sustainable, wanting transparency in terms of how products are delivered to them across the entire value chain, the entire supply chain, but also the working practices that delivered that product to your doorstep. And if you look at some of the challenges that the likes of Boohoo in the UK have faced in the last few months, you will see the importance of doing that. But you also see this spike in demand for key products or different products. So webcams for all of us as we connect digitally have shot through the roof. And if you look at the share price of Logitech, one of the key providers of those webcams, that really reflects the demand for those products. So, that highlights the fluctuating nature and volatile nature of demand for different products based on the changing spending patterns. Then you see new partnerships emerging, new ecosystem orientations. So who would have thought that Morrisons and Amazon would have come together as part of a key partnership to deliver same-day delivery service for Morrisons partners who are also Amazon Prime customers? Competitors coming together because they need to compromise to deliver something that customers are demanding. And this is happening across all different areas. So it's not just in terms of online, but it's in apparel, in fashion. If you look at H&M, they've opened up their supply chain to invite new players to deliver some of the capabilities as part of that supply chain to get to scale. The next game changer is all about how tech is driving value. This chart really highlights how Ocado, with a focus on tech, has seen its valuation increase dramatically in 2020 as a result of the investments that it's made in its tech platforms, being able to sell those tech platforms to other retailers versus Marks & Spencer, which is a pretty traditional retailer. And they've actually come together to create a partnership along the same lines as Morrisons and Amazon that I highlighted earlier for food delivery in a shorter time frame. And you see this emergence of new types of commerce models off the back of that. So we see this focus on quick commerce, so delivering capabilities in 15 or 30-minute windows on two wheels, smaller selection of goods. And that's the balance between speed and risk that is starting to emerge as part of the shift towards the tech and value creation in the retail sector. So those are some of the retail game changers, and our view is that those game changers on the left-hand side of this chart that you can see are part of what needs to be taken into account for any retailer as they create a new operating model for the future to deliver what we call real-time personalization. Now, that's the holy grail, is real-time personalization at scale for retailers. But in order to do that, based on what we've experienced in 2020 with those game changers, you do need a different operating model, a completely different operating model. And that is what is going to be the basis for that real-time personalization at scale. Now, our view is that the new operating model is going to involve four key things. It's going to involve a new digital roadmap. So that's what I alluded to earlier in terms of the CEOs and the C-suite of retailers having to create a new use case journey towards that future enterprise. The digital dream team, which is the C-suite, is also known as the C-suite, but this is being able to put digital first as part of the operating model and executing on that accordingly. You do need a different technology architecture to support that, which is more integrated, open and extensible in nature, but it also requires a very aggressive core modernization strategy. Now, what I'm going to do is take you through each of those four key elements of that new operating model for retail in a bit more detail, because we do think that that is what is going to be critical to deliver that real-time personalization at scale. Now, so let's focus on the digital roadmap first and foremost. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to have to recreate the digital roadmap based on those retail game changes that I highlighted earlier. But clearly the focus for real-time personalization is on customer experience and focusing on delivering game-changing customer experiences as a differentiator. And generally, a lot of retails spend a lot of time on omni-channel, on omni-experience to deliver that real-time personalization. And that's important, and that needs to continue to sustain retailers moving forward. But we also think there's a critical requirement to include the back office as part of those efforts, as part of that roadmap. Because that's how you get to scale. You can't launch a new mobile app without connecting it back to your supply chain and your financials and your HR systems. So what I'm going to be doing here with this roadmap is to try and give you some ideas as to how you bring together those different elements of the back office to the front office to drive that scale. So if you think about Horizon 3, which is the longer term, what we're going to do is look at Horizon 3 and then reverse engineer back to Horizon 2 and 1, so the medium and shorter terms, to understand the role of finance and HR in each of those horizons to deliver that scale. So let's focus on Horizon 3 first. So we start at the end and then we reverse engineer. So real-time personalization, what is required from a financial system in order to do that? Well, our view is that this is an ecosystem financial platform, which is basically gives you the ability to simulate an overview of the impact of key financial decisions on the ecosystem. So, for example, put yourself in the shoes of that CFO of Morrison's in the context of their partnership with Amazon. If they make a change in terms of some of their investments, what are the impacts of that chain on not just on Morrison's, but also on Amazon? So that's that ecosystem-centric business model which needs to be taken into account by that ecosystem financial platform. On the HR front, you need a skills platform, a cross-organizational skills platform that provides that broader retail ecosystem with shared pools of talent that they can tap into based on real-time customer needs. And so that's going not just internal to the organization, but increasingly external as well. So that's Horizon 3. Horizon 2 is all about fluidity and agility in the front office, but how that drives the back office fluidity as well. So agile workforce, in terms of HR, which is all about creating fluid organizational structures, flexible, outcome-based teams, and that's based on an intelligent HR platform with detailed skills profiles to deliver adaptive squad planning, as an example, based on the real-time needs of the business. This is not external, but just in the business, but it has to be agile. Similarly, for finance, you need to be able to provide a holistic evaluation of investments. So you could be making some acquisitions, there could be mergers, could be divestitures, could be consolidation, and you need to see that holistic view from a planning, from a reporting, from a consolidation standpoint in the organization, but not just for finance, but across the broader teams as well. Finally, Horizon 1, in the here and the now. Clearly, in Horizon 1, retailers are going to be focusing on CX, customer experience, in the front office, but in the back office, it's all about resource optimization. For finance, that means supplier network optimization, which is really thinking about a flexible financial reporting, consolidation, and planning engine to optimize supplier networks, balancing cost, risk, and demand satisfaction rates by supplier. For HR, it's all about talent optimization, and increasingly that's about employee experiences, delivering game-changing employee experiences to deal with, the seasonality in retail. So you're dealing with hourly employees, shift employees, full-time employees, and you've got to be able to provide experience scorecards effectively to them to drive employee advocacy, because there will be a war for talent on an ongoing basis in retail, regardless of whether it's those different types of job profiles, but moving forward depending on the fluctuating demand. So that's the digital roadmap that connects the back office to the front office. It is constituted of a use case journey. It's based on this use case journey, which what we've seen is when you get granular like this in terms of these use cases, and more specific in terms of the business initiatives that a retailer needs to put in place to achieve that future enterprise state, which is a platform for real-time personalization, what we've experienced in 2020 requires retailers generally to reprioritize some of the use cases. So, for example, in Horizon 1, you're probably going to see a focus on digital workforce management, as an example, or from an HR standpoint, or revenue and margin assurance for the supply network optimization. Clearly, that's a big focus. And on the front office, there's going to be an increased focus on omni-channel order orchestration and fulfillment. So that's the reprioritization that we're seeing. But there's also movement of use cases. So you might see next-gen payments moving from Horizon 2 to Horizon 1 because of what we talked about in terms of that shift, that increased shift towards cashless and the need to have different payment options from a retailer standpoint. So CEOs, the broader C-suite, are going to have to think about reprioritizing, aligning this roadmap to execute on it based on a new normal, that better normal that we highlighted earlier. So this comes to the next element of our operating model, which is the digital dream team, the C-suite. And generally, what the executor of that digital roadmap tend to be the heads of customer experience, CMOs, the front office people with the heads of operations. What we're saying here is that you need to bring HR to help with that people management piece in terms of safety, productivity in that hybrid world moving forward. You need finance, you need the finance teams to understand the implications on cash management, on liquidity, on future business decisions around financials in order to drive that scale. And then also critically, you need IT, you need the technology leadership to be part of the discussion from start to finish, because they're going to be dealing with variability, unprecedented levels of fluctuating demands, unpredictability, and they've got to provide a technology platform in order to do that. And it's not just the CIO, it's the CTO, heads of innovation, chief digital officers, all of those technology leaders need to come together to deliver this integrated technology architecture that is open, intelligent, and extensible. Now, this is a conceptual model which highlights the need for organizations to modernize their traditional enterprise IT stack, from infrastructure, hardware, database, middleware, applications, all the way through that towards this intelligent core, which is increasingly cloud-based, but is data-driven as well. So you get the data pipelines coming not just from internal processes and actions, but increasingly external triggers and ecosystem behavior that needs to be brought into that intelligent core. It needs to be open to allow the seamless flow of that data. It needs to be intelligent to drive the next best action for employees as part of that game-changing employee experience that I highlighted earlier. But it needs to be extensible because it's going to be flexibility, the name of the game here, speed to market, speed to outcomes, and you need an extensible architecture in order to support that. Now, in principle, that makes a lot of sense, and we think that we know that the technology teams need to go all for one and one for all and come together to deliver this type of integrated architecture. But it requires a critical capability, which is in the core, and that requires an aggressive core modernization strategy. We have seen for retailers across the board that their mission-critical environments in IT and broadly across the core have been set up for a business model that is decades old. And it's not really built for the flexibility and scale that is required to deliver that real-time personalization that I highlighted earlier, that is part of what we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis now. So there needs to be this aggressive core modernization strategy where you unpick the monolithic applications of the past and federate them in terms of modular SaaS applications or even apps. So that's increasingly going to be cloud-based, but also extensible because you need to fill the gaps with new capabilities. Could be around contactless, it could be around curbside pickup. It could be around internally capabilities around cash forecasting. That needs to fill those gaps as part of that core modernization strategy. So we've covered a lot of ground here. 4 key elements for that new operating model for retail. We've talked about the new digital roadmap and the need to build that out across those 3 horizons. The digital dream team that brings in HR, finance, and IT. That new type of technology architecture where you don't have a sidecar model, internally facing IT versus digital IT. They're brought part together as part of that one platform. And then as part of that, you have this aggressive core modernization strategy, which unpicks the monolithic applications of the past and makes them much more modular and flexible to deal with the dynamic nature of the markets that are going to be the norm moving forward. So we do think that is required. It's absolutely required because the next normal will be digital first. It'll be increasingly contactless. It'll be virtual, regardless of the subsector. You're going to have to provide technology-driven capabilities that cater for the changing customer demands, which are going to constantly fluctuate. What we've experienced in 2020 in terms of the volatility and complexity will increase in 2021. So we do think that that's part of what needs to be taken into account as we move from response to reignition. There is a major opportunity now for a reset, to rethink business models in retail. It needs to be tech-centric, it needs to be platform-oriented, it needs to be based on an ecosystem to deliver that real-time personalization at scale, and technology underpins that business model to bring innovation to the core. So with that, I want to provide 4 key recommendations for you just to think about as you move towards creating your 2021 technology roadmap for the future retail enterprise. We see and we appreciate how important the frontline workers have been in retail over the past 9-10 months. But motivation is king. We need resilience now into that people side of the business. The workforce is going to have to deal with a lot more change, and we need to engage them, empower them with those new employee experiences that are highlighted so that they feel motivated to deliver that customer experience. Part of that is upskilling them, providing them with real-time career development recommendations as part of their employee journeys, regardless of the job profile. But then we do need to reshape the skills landscape because that digital-first retail operating model, that digital-first next normal that I highlighted, will require digital skills. And we need to bridge that skills gap, and we need to bridge it quickly in order to deliver that sustainable competitive advantage. Thirdly, it's about a new financial engine because the flexibility required for finance, but also for HR, based on market consolidation, some of the new partnerships, new customer triggers, it's going to require a much more dynamic financial capabilities to drive real-time decision-making, to think about the implications of key decisions on the ecosystem, on partners, on customers, on the internal teams. That's going to be critical moving forward. And finally, an analogy to wrap up here. 4-wheel drive retail. You have to think about taking that front office level of innovation in terms of speed and scale to the core. Both need to move at the same pace. You can't have one moving at slow speed, another one moving at fast speed. They both need to move it at a fast pace, and that involves bringing that level of innovation, that speed and that scale into the core and driving a new mindset in terms of the teams, but also a new approach in terms of the technology architecture. So with that, I hope that that's given you some ideas, some insights in terms of how to reframe retail, to move from response to reignition. And I really look forward to your feedback, your questions moving forward. Thank you very much.
Welcome to our customer panel session with Franziska Wiehaff, Head of HR Projects and Systems, Fielmann, and Nicola Skeels, HR Systems Manager, Harrods. It is moderated by Dr. Theo Pham, founder of Delta School.
So welcome to our customer panel. My name is Theo Pham, I'm your moderator, and today we're going to talk to industry experts about how Workday has helped them to navigate through this very particular year. When we talk about innovation and the transformation in retail, there's lots of discussion about the rather customer-facing innovation like delivery or maybe creating engaging in-store experiences. However, none of that would really work without the right infrastructure in place. And while topics like HR planning, processes, onboarding, and hiring don't seem as flashy as autonomous delivery vehicles, they are as important, or much more important actually, for the success of a retail organization. So today I'm delighted to welcome two industry experts, and we will talk to Franziska of Vielmann and to Nicola of Harrods about their experience in the past year and how implementing Workday has helped them through this transformation. So Franziska is working for Vielmann, which is Germany's leading optician, and Nicola is working for Harrods, the world-famous department store in London. So welcome to our panel. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And if maybe the two of you could introduce yourself, let's start off with Franziska.
Yes, thank you, Theo. My name is Franziska Wiehoff. I work for the company Vielmann for the last 21 years in different positions throughout Europe and especially in HR for the last 15 years. And since January 2020, I'm head of HR IT and therefore responsible for the Workday project management within Vielmann. Vielmann is a family retail optician with almost 21,000 employees and 800 stores in actually 7 different countries throughout Europe.
Thank you. How about you, Nicola?
Hi, thank you. I'm Nicola Skills. I'm the HR Systems Manager at Harrods. I've been at Harrods for about 2.5 years now, so since the very start of the Workday journey. Previous to that, I was at Kering. So Harrods, as you've mentioned, is world-leading department store based in London, in Knightsbridge on the Brompton Road, and is the largest department store in Europe. Harrods has around 12,000 workers, which is made up of employees and contingent workers, and we have a good range of population across retail, hospitality, distribution and support functions.
Thank you very much. So the two of you have been working with Workday, and what I would be interested in is that when you were looking to implement a new system, what was the reason to dive into that process in the first place? Because obviously no one wants to do a whole systems migration. It's not a lot of fun to look at new systems, to implement new stuff. So what were kind of the major pain points or challenges that you were facing when you decided to look into a new system? Maybe if Franziska wants to start.
For Vielmann, we were coming from a very decentralized organization and had a best of breed approach. So in our 7 different countries, we had about 25 different applications for our HR landscape. And therefore we faced some challenges which were that we didn't have any ESS or MSS scenarios, so we actually don't have any possibilities to reach out to our employees or managers. We have a really high manual data entry in all the different systems. We don't have any integrations or almost no integrations between the different systems, which makes our processes very slow. And we were unable to fulfill the store requirements in staff. So we really didn't have enough staff and our customers need to wait too long. So when in 2019, I think it was, our new business strategy implied a new HR strategy, it was clear that we needed to change something or to do something to these challenges.
Thank you, Franziska. How about you, Nicola? What was the situation at Harrods when you were starting this whole process?
Yep, so prior to Workday, so we had a very outdated and disjointed sort of HR systems landscape, and we relied very much on different HR systems, and it all required a lot of manual data entry. So whether that was from our recruitment system, our HR system and our absence tool, we didn't have at the time any manager self-service or employee self-service. It was all very much driven by our HR shared service team, all manual intervention. So our processes were just not smooth at all. So for instance, any people processes that happened, it was all done via an Excel form. That was then sent round emails for approvals, lots of different emails flying around, and then would end up with our HR shared service team, who then just had to manually enter data into all of the different systems. And also as well, I think one of the biggest things for us was that employees didn't have access to these HR systems, so they couldn't even look at their contracts, they couldn't check their absence balance correctly. It very much heavily relied on our HR shared service team. So really looking for a new HR system, a new piece of functionality that could give access to our employee managers was really important for us.
Okay. Yeah, so to me, these two situations seem kind of similar. I mean, both of your companies have been leading in your industries for quite a time. You've been along for quite some time. I mean, how old is Harrods now?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot here. I want to say 180 years. Hopefully I've got that right. And to the people from Harrods listening, hopefully that's okay.
Okay. So definitely long before Microsoft Excel existed.
Yeah.
Um, But what I think is quite normal with, with big organizations that grow over time, that obviously over time you will add more and more tools as the company grows. And so then at some point you will have a big fat jungle of different tools that may or may not play nice with each other. So I think it makes sense to at some point to say, okay, now we've had enough of this. We have to kind of integrate everything, even though everyone who's involved, especially the two of you, know that it's going to be a lot of pain at first to do this whole migration, to retrain everybody on your new systems, but knowing that in the long term it will really pay off. So the next thing I would be interested in is that both of your companies are obviously leading in your industry. I think every company would be delighted to work with you. So I'm sure that you've had a lot of pitches who were trying to, basically start working with you. What in the end led you to choose Workday when faced with different solutions?
For us at Fielmann, it was that when looking at our HR infrastructure, it was clear that we needed to change something, and there were actually three main capabilities that spoke for Workday as a platform, and that made the Workday as our platform of choice. The first thing was that we actually wanted to have a high usability of the system so that employees and managers are able to spend time in the store and not on administrative tasks. The second one was that we really had a high wish to have everything integrated in one system, and Workday, with their power of one, were able to sell this. And the third point for us was that we needed a high improvement on digitalization in comparison to having a fax machine or paper-based processes. We really wanted to digitalize our processes and thought that Workday will be the system of choice.
Okay, sounds really interesting. How about the situation at Harrods? Do you still have a lot of paper to push around, or are you already fully digitized?
I would say 90% digitalized. So Harrods wanted to be able to just have greater data visibility on one single platform. So to provide more accurate reporting and dashboards so the business can make more informed decisions. And like I said previously, we wanted to give power back to people processes, back to our managers and our employees through a self-service tool. And I think one great thing with Workday that worked for us was the fact that it's the app on the mobile. You know, majority of our population are either shop floor based in our distribution centres. They're not on a computer day to day. So having the mobile application and being able to update their details was definitely a real positive point for us and with Workday. And also just having a simplified HR tech landscape. So having that one single source of truth platform and then being able to integrate with other systems. We didn't want to look for a new piece of technology where we then had to buy a different recruitment system, a different maybe absence or time tracking system. So just having everything in one place was really important to us.
So I think the two of you are mentioning very interesting points. So on the one hand, we have data and system integration, which obviously gives the transparency that you talked about, but also it's a lot more efficient. But what I think is also quite interesting is that you mentioned, usability and self-service. Because when we think about consumer apps like, say, Instagram, we all know that they're being A/B tested to the maximum so that they're really, really to use. And oftentimes those enterprise solutions, they don't put that much thought into it. So it's great to hear that you feel that Workday is addressing that, because especially when you are onboarding new people all the time who have to learn the new systems, from my own experience, if people find that it's not fun to use or too difficult to use, they may try it once or twice, and then they completely give up on it and just try to do their own workaround. And they're like, oh, screw this new tool. I'm going to do it the old way with email and Excel, even though they're not supposed to do that. So it's obviously very, very important that, that even on the, or especially on the enterprise side, that the usability is really, excellent in order to empower people to do self-service. So obviously, so this question goes to Franziska. So you being a international company complicates things a little bit, because in every country systems are a little bit different. Can you tell us a little bit about the international implementation?
Maybe I switched to the project Start, which started in February 2020, and we are implementing Workday for 7 countries throughout Europe. So it's not that complicated as having a project with 50 countries all over the world. It's only 7 countries in Europe, but anyhow, it makes it a little bit more complicated, but not that complicated, because actually Workday comes along with good best practices, which were our base to implement Workday and to internationally align our processes so that we have one global standard for hiring employees or recruiting new employees or candidates. So looking at our project, we actually started in February 2020 with 2 phases, and we are now 3/4 into phase 1, when we will go live in March 2021. So 13 months for 7 countries, for actually 4 different modules within Workday, which is HR Core, Recruiting, Learning, and Absence Management. Those are the main modules that we use in phase 1. And then after having gone live in 2021, we will start phase 2 in autumn 2021, which will last about 10 to 12 months. And then we will implement further modules for Workday, which are talent and performance, time tracking, scheduling, expenses, planning, and I think some advanced HR core and compensation themes.
So just from the functions that you mentioned, we can see that the scope of Workday is really, really big. So moving to Harrods now, which of the core functionalities were you focusing on when doing the implementation?
Yep, so we went live in May 2019, and we sort of did a bit of a 2-phase rollout. So our phase 1, where we went live with core HR, recruiting, comp, advanced comp, talent performance, and absence, and we felt going live with all of those modules at the same time made sense, just because they had touch points on one another. And then in March of last year, we went live with learning. So that sort of came at a second stage, and we decided that really just so we didn't put too much change on our population all at one go. And it felt nicely that learning came a bit later and came at a good time as well.
So everyone who has done such a major implementation knows that this is quite complicated and hard work as it is. Now everything is obviously being complicated with COVID-19, which started in March of last year already. So can you tell us how this has impacted the project implementation and maybe even your business overall? Can you share some of your experience around that, Franziska?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Our project was planned before COVID, and we planned a big project mainly based in Hamburg in our headquarters, and project meetings with our international colleagues every 4 weeks. So it was really planned as a normal Vielmann project. And then about 10 days before our first project meeting, COVID hit. And we needed to change something very quickly. So from one day to another, we replanned and did actually everything remote. Gladly, we had implemented MS Teams in January 2020, so we had a good base to communicate remotely, but actually we weren't really used to collaborating virtually. So from the first look, a big challenge, but actually we turned it into good opportunities too, because our project for now is on time. We are quite happy to work remotely, as we actually found out that working remotely makes our project a lot quicker to collaborate. We just have a lot easier way to exchange with colleagues from Switzerland, Austria, Poland, and so on than we did before, because before we would have waited 4 weeks for our next project meeting to discuss different options, and now we just stick to MS Teams and quickly ask our questions and really quickly solve problems or challenges remotely. That works quite well. It's, as you see, it is in a very efficient way to work. And also what was good from our side, we it was a good point that COVID starts, because COVID started before our global design workshops. So we already knew that COVID will impact our business a little bit. For example, with COVID, we changed that for recruiting processes we use for the first interviews. We don't do them in our offices anymore. We do them in Teams. So we were able to actually implement those changes that COVID caused into our new processes. There were actually 3 big changes that came up with Corona. One I just mentioned, we are doing our recruiting process very much virtually. Then we needed to quickly change our education model. Before, we did all the learning processes in different hotels or education offices. And we changed that within 2 weeks. We changed it to remote education, and we are glad that with our Go Live on Workday, we also have learning as a module, and then we'll be able to do even more e-learnings within Workday. That is good. And one challenge or one big change we had was actually concerning our stores, which doesn't really have an impact on our Workday project, but has a great impact on Vielmann as a company. As I mentioned earlier, we have a big problem with customers waiting. So when COVID hits, we actually had the opportunity to implement in a really quick way 2 new functionalities for Vielmann. We now ask customers to do appointments on our Vielmann website. And a second one is a digital waiting list. So if a customer comes to our store, he doesn't have an appointment, then we put him on a digital waiting list and tell him, well, come back in 20 minutes and you don't need to wait. And we weren't actually, we didn't implement that before, because we didn't know really how the customer will accept this new model. And with COVID that changed, and we just implemented it, even though it was not 100% perfect, but we started with an 80% solution, and we are now how do you call that? I don't know. We are implementing improvements on those systems one at a time. And I think that's a great impact for us on the Workday side, because with our project right now, we will go live with an 70 to 80% solution, and then we will improve it when we are already live and when we have the feedback from our employees and managers what needs to be changed.
Yeah, there's this old saying, better done than perfect. And I think it's quite fascinating that you're willing to, now also implement a non-perfect solution, because it's just time critical right now. Maybe just on the bit with the waiting list and the registration. Do you feel that this is something that has been requested or has been on the roadmap for a couple of years, but was always kind of either deprioritized or maybe not being shipped because it was not perfect? And now you can see that, if we have to, it is actually possible to do it faster. What are your thoughts about that?
I think at Fielmann we really had a big change in the last 3 years, having a stronger focus on digitalization than before. So I think, for the last 3 years, probably we already thought about those possibilities to work together with the customers. But I don't know if it was already in the pipeline for the last 3 years and we didn't want to implement it. I think it was more like an idea that already existed, and then COVID came up and we just said, okay, now let's do it right now.
Yeah, okay, because there's basically no choice, right? We have to do it, but when we have to, we can be pretty fast and efficient. Nicola, I understand that you also introduced quite a lot of innovation at Harrods, especially when it comes to learning and onboarding. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, like I said previously, we went live with learning in March of last year, a couple of weeks before the first lockdown came in London. So it was a bit of a godsend that we went live with learning. So prior to Workday Learning, every Monday we had induction for all of our new starters, where they would come to our Knightsbridge store and have half a day induction. Then obviously with a national lockdown, can't mix anymore, we can't go to store, and it was a bit of like, okay, what are we going to do now? So we managed to put all of our onboarding online via an e-learning module. It's live with one of our learning managers, and I think it's just a real credit to our learning and development team how quickly they made all of our training sessions and learning modules to e-learning and pushing them on Workday, because throughout the project, e-learning, as much as it was, we need to move towards e-learning, but classroom-based was such a big thing for Harrods, especially for our retail staff. We need to get everyone together in classroom, but as we know, in the last year, classrooms no longer, everything does need to be virtual. So definitely the teams there created a lot more modules and really good feedback from people. I've just had a new starter in my team who had virtual onboarding, and she said it was, would have been just as good as being there in person. So that's really important. I think probably with every company, when COVID hit, it was very reactive for all companies and how we change things on Workday. A big thing for us as well was around our notifications and comms that went out via Workday. It mentioned going into the store, what you do on your first day. So we had to quickly review all of those and change the wording on that to sort of be, we're at home, working from home, and this is sort of how onboarding is or how things work now. A big change for us as well was the furlough scheme that was introduced. I think when furlough came into play last March, I remember looking on communities because my manager came to me and said, we need to start recording this in Workday. I don't know how we do it, but we need to do it ASAP. And I remember looking on communities and there was hardly any posts about furlough leave. And I was just thinking, oh gosh, how are we going to manage this? And it's just, I think so interesting that now, because everyone in the world is going through this global pandemic and everyone is having the same troubles, like you can always find the answer on community now. But yeah, we had to quickly find a way of how we record people being on furlough leave in Workday. It was very reactive at the start. I think sometimes when I look back now, I may have changed how I would have done it, but at the time it still works now. So why fix something that's not broken? But I would definitely say they were the main things for us. Other big things, not necessarily Workday, but with recruitment, moving all of our interviews online. Like you said, Francisca, with Teams, Microsoft Teams, having that virtually for our recruitment team, being able to interview. And we did have to change some of our recruitment business processes to support with, the new ways of working and being virtual as well. Yeah, definitely a lot of change from our design workshops in the last year. It's quite, looking back actually and thinking about it now, the amount of change that we've made in Workday is actually quite significant. But I think if we didn't have Workday, we wouldn't be in a good as place as we are now. So I think it is really important when you do have such a sophisticated piece of HR technology enabled to help you with your daily work.
Yeah. So thanks so much for sharing those experiences. I think it's really interesting to see just how many different changes and innovations you have introduced in such a short time. And obviously, none of us want to be in this situation. We want it to stop as soon as possible. But from what I'm hearing, there are quite a lot of things that are there to stay that just make the whole organization a lot more efficient and will make both the, processes in the background, but also the customer interaction a lot more, convenient and practical. So I think, long term, those definitely make sense and it's good. And they had to be done at some point. So why not just do it now when maybe we don't have, anything else to do? We might just as well build up on our infrastructure. So now we talked about the implementation, the different use cases. Francisca, can you tell us a little bit about the first benefits that you have experienced along the way?
So actually, we are not live yet, but we already know how Workday works, so I can say something about it. Actually, Workday is in line with what we expected it to be. The potential benefits we saw or we identified were usability for employees and managers, integration in one platform, and the digitalization. I think those three benefits that we identified are totally there. But actually, we have some more benefits that came along the way. I would say one Nicola just mentioned. We really adore using Workday community because you always find an answer to your questions. Maybe not in the first day, but 3 days later, you'll find something to the topic you're you are searching for. And then really Workday changed our approach, how we look at business processes. Before, we always thought that we need a solution for every country. And now we base on the Workday best practices and just go along the way and only change those best practices if it's really necessary for a country. So we end up having global designed processes in most of our modules that didn't need to be changed a little bit. But looking at our 7 countries in Europe, it's really, in most of our modules, we have business processes that are globally aligned. Which was actually something Nicola also mentioned before, was the part of transparency. We didn't expect that to be or to have as high as an impact, but actually it turned out that was the thing that our employees and managers perceived the most or the biggest in our user acceptance test. The transparency about their data was really the biggest point or the biggest applause we got there. And And then after go live, we're expecting that we will be able to manage our business processes by ourselves and will not depend on external consultants. So we are quite happy about that too.
So I think measuring the benefits of such a big solution can be a bit tricky at times because A, it touches so many different parts of the organization, and B, because it's not directly related to, say, something like sales, where you can exactly measure, okay, we did X and then Y came out of it. So my question to Nicola, at Harrods, what is your approach to try to measure the benefits that you're gaining from the solution?
Yeah. So at the beginning of the project, we worked on establishing a baseline with the Workday value team to set project ambition, potential benefits, and assess our maturity level. And just before Christmas, looking at that baseline, we worked on building a value realization to measure the benefits that have generated from Workday and also identify our potential area of improvement. And some of our benefits were, I think our biggest benefit is our one single source platform for all of our HR processes and data, having all of that under one roof and then feeding our downstream systems, I think is probably one of the biggest benefits that we've got. And then also just some other benefits would be around data security and data accuracy as well. I think it's important for employees to know that their personal data is safe, and having that just in one system, I think it assures employees of that, and definitely the security that we have in Workday as well. Also, one of our big benefits that we saw last year was around our bonus and salary review process. So prior to Workday, it was very much probably took around 3 months. Data was downloaded from a system and then was passed to our HR business partners. As we all know, as soon as you download data out of a system, it's out of date automatically. So when the data was received back, there was always problems with it. But now having that whole process in Workday, the data was always up to date, and the process improved, and probably in total took maybe 1 or 2 weeks or so to actually from start to finish. So that was a real improvement. And also just the role around HR being more of that strategic partner to the business and more of that advisor role. So as I said at the start, prior to Workday, more of our HR shared service team, their role was very much data entry of all the data they received, but now their role is partnering with the business and advising them on how to do a process, why would you do a process, and I think it just gives more exposure for our HR team.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine that this makes the whole job more enjoyable for everybody involved. As you said, maybe less of the tedious, very manual work and maybe more strategic, conceptual work. So I think this is also a great benefit that maybe is not as obvious when you first introduce such a system, because then you maybe just think about the efficiencies that you might gain, but maybe not think about what you can do with this now freed up capacity that you will gain. So this is very interesting to see that HR is being elevated within the organization and can also take on more of the roles and responsibilities that they're actually came to work for, instead of dealing just with systems and processes. So that's very fascinating. Yeah. So now that you've been live for quite a while, what does the roadmap look like for the next couple of years? What kind of features or functionalities are you looking to implement next?
Yep. So actually in November just gone, we launched Workday Help, which is the new case management functionality of Workday, part of the people experience module. So prior to the Workday Help, we did have a self-service tool. Again, it was one of our legacy systems, and a ticketing tool, not a self-service tool. And employees would just either call up or email our shared service team with their query. They wouldn't necessarily know where their query was sat, who it was sat with. But so now we've implemented Workday Help. Employees again have full visibility of that ticket, and that is actually, it's the best feedback we've had from our employees about all of Workday actually. They've all just said it's the easiest module of Workday to use. They like to see that where their tickets sat, who queries sat with, and there's like chat functionality which they really like as well. So I'm glad in a bad year we were able to implement something that really supported our employees. And then I think looking through this year, definitely as part of that, people experience the new homepage that Workday has brought out, the new solid knowledge base, and just looking at journeys as well. I think working virtually and knowing that this is the normal and is going to go on for quite some time now, just how can we make onboarding for new starters virtually more welcoming for employees, you know, make sure they've got all the information they need, and really just how can we utilise Workday at the best of its ability.
So a lot of people who are in attendance right now, they are either considering working with Workday or they are already working with Workday and are thinking about how to best make use of the powerful capabilities and how to leverage the tool to the full extent. So what is like one piece of advice from your experience that you would give these people who either want to work with Workday or who just want to make more use of it? Franziska, what's the one piece of advice?
I think my advice is more for the new customers. I would put the advice that you shouldn't be afraid of the ambitious project planning, because when you look at or when you talk to Workday and look at a possible project planning, maybe you think, "Ooh, we cannot do that." And for Fielmann, we weren't sure if we would be able to implement a new system within 13 months for all of our 7 countries in a Big Bang approach. And really, it works. We are on time, we are on budget, and we will be going live in March. So I think what Workday comes along is a great possibility to rely on. It's Workday comes along with best practices, not only for the business processes but also for the project management, and it makes it really reliable to be able to do a project in the expected or in the expected amount of time. That is great. Yeah. Maybe on top of that, what I didn't expect to be that way, when doing a Workday project, you are able to look at the system really, really early during the project. Like after 2 or 3 months, you see the first prototype, and now 3 quarters into the project, we know what we know how the system will look like, and we have the possibility to have 2 or 3 months now to prepare our go live and to prepare all the documents we need for the go live. So yeah, we are quite happy, and it's a lot of work. You need to say that, but it is possible to implement Workday for 7 countries in 13 months, no problem.
Okay, so you're saying even though it does look very ambitious and it is very ambitious, you shouldn't really be afraid of it because it is feasible even in this current situation because there's a lot of infrastructure and support in place. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
exactly.
Yeah,
And experience also.
and experience. Great. How about you, Nicola? What should people definitely be paying attention to?
So I think even before go live and then even afterwards, I think testing is such a huge importance for any implementation or any new piece of functionality that you're planning to put into Workday. I think don't underestimate the amount of time that you need on testing, because the more you test, especially before go live, the more you're gonna go through the processes, and not just necessarily familiarize yourself with the processes and how they work, but also try and iron out any of those little kinks maybe that there is to get it as good as you can get it for go live. And also involving, I think, as many HR people in testing, because testing is the place where people are going to learn how to use a new system, and also you're not afraid to break your testing environment. A lot of people, are afraid to click a button in your live production environment because they're unsure of what it's going to do. They don't want to break a system. So I think the more HR people you can get involved in your testing, the more confident they're going to feel with this new piece of functionality. And then I think just on top of that, one big thing is if you're not going live with Workday payroll, but you are going to have maybe a payroll integration, it's so important to involve members of your payroll team from the very start of your project. I think that's something that Harrods definitely underestimated at the start. You think HR project, maybe not going to have much of an impact on payroll, but it has the biggest impact on payroll. So the earlier that you can get them involved and as part of those decisions, I think when you go through to your sort of payroll testing, will be much smoother and much easier.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I've learned quite a lot, and I'm sure the audience did as well. My main takeaways are that such a big project is still feasible and possible during this situation. That remote project management does work fine, and the two of you are proof of that. I learned that a retail organization can benefit on an organizational level with things like increased data availability and transparency. But what I also found quite interesting is also how you highlighted how different stakeholders can benefit from these changes, starting from customers who may have a better customer experience in the store because now they can just schedule some appointments, as we saw in the case of Fielmann. Or you talked about how employees have a much easier time now with everything, starting with self-service, with things like remote onboarding or even e-learning. But also I thought it was fascinating to see the role of HR changing, now being less burdened with systems and data entry and tedious manual work, and now with more time and capacity to work on the more strategic topics. So I think it was a really neat discussion around how to do the actual implementation, but also how Workday can benefit the organization as a whole, as well as the different stakeholders. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences and for taking the time today. Thank you, and greetings to Hamburg and to London.
Thank you.
Welcome to our final session, a conversation with Laurent Homeyer, Strategic Industry Advisor for Retail and Hospitality at Workday, and Anne Kotsorek, Managing Director at Accenture. This session is moderated by Jennifer Johnson, Principal Industry Marketing Manager for Retail and Hospitality at Workday.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our session titled Organizational Agility, the Key to Digital Growth. Today, we're going to discuss ways organizational agility can be reached and the impact it can have on your organization. My name is Jennifer Johnson. I am the Global Industry Marketing Lead here at Workday for Retail and Consumer Product Goods. I'm joined today by two experts in the retail and consumer product goods space, and they'll be sharing their perspectives on this topic, as well as real-life examples on how organizations are obtaining agility and resilience. As you know, now more than ever, retailers are needing to be more agile to respond to and adjust to changing market conditions. Organizational agility is the ability of a retailer to renew itself, adapt, and succeed in a rapidly changing, ambiguous, turbulent environment. There are many aspects that impact organizational agility, and today we're going to explore a few of them, including skills, workforce allocation, communication and collaboration, and how access to real-time data can provide fast and informed decision-making. First, let's meet our panelists. I'd like to welcome Laurent and Anne. Can you please introduce yourself, your company, and your roles? Anne, do you mind going first?
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm happy to do so. My name is Anne Kotzorik, and I'm a Managing Director in Accenture Strategy and Consulting Consumer Goods and Service Practice based in Düsseldorf, Germany. I bring almost 20 years of professional HR experience. There are 15 years as a consultant with Accenture. Accenture is a global leading services company with almost 506,000 employees globally and $44.3 billion in revenue in our last fiscal year 2020. Now over to Laurent.
Thank you, Anne. My name is Laurent Meyer. I'm industry advisor for retail in EMEA, based in Paris, France. I bring 20 years of professional experience in retail and technology, thereof 2.5 years as industry advisor with Workday. Workday is a leading provider of enterprise cloud application for finance, planning, and human capital management, helping customers adapt and thrive in the changing world. Workday has 12,400 employees around the globe and serves 7,900 customers worldwide, with more than 70% are live.
Great, thank you both. Now let's get into the core of our discussion. The first question I have is for you, Laurent. Companies need visibility into their employee skills and any potential skills gap in order to address their changing business needs. How do you see skills insight, reskilling, and employee development impacting organizational agility?
Thank you, Jen. That's a really good point. As the industry is changing at an unforeseen pace right now, we are now entering a skill-based economy, where companies must adapt their HR strategy from recruiting to performance management, talent and development to adapt this new reality. To gain in speed and efficiency, we see more and more organizations restructuring from a hierarchical business model to a project-based squads kind of model, with specific set of skills that come together for particular task or initiative. To face this new market move with agility, retailers and CPG companies will need to constantly adjust and scale the skill supply and the skill demand within the organization to respond customer expectation, but also technology acceleration, new players and disruptor entries. To do so, I see two main domains on which to focus. The first is to be able to map and monitor company skills reservoir and identify trending skills. I will take the example of Patagonia. Patagonia has grown to a tiny company to a global leader in fashion. What they are doing, they are using artificial intelligence to be able to map the skills inside the whole of the company and identify which skill is required to certain task or job and help fluidify the movement inside the company. The second example, the second domain I want to stress is to be able to adjust skill supply in retraining and in reskilling to build tomorrow's leader and keep up with market evolution. And I want to take the example of a great big grocer in US that has reviewed from A to Z its own learning policy, starting with the fact that 75% of their management structure was coming from hourly workers. So they revisited their approach on recruiting and learning, coming from more hybrid learning, on-job learning, but also coaching and peer-to-peer interaction within the company, and also building an academy across their store. But I would like to have the voice of Anne on this particular topic. Anne?
Thanks, Laurent. I share your view. So we as Accenture also see a highly increasing demand for up and reskilling since the outbreak of the pandemic in particular. And in fact, our recent employee study with 5,400 workers and more than 700 C-level executives conducted between April and July 2020 showed that the employable need of a worker is one of 6 essential human needs in the so-called net better off model that explains 64% of a worker's potential. As you can see here on the slide, the other 5 human needs are emotional and mental, relational, physical, purposeful, and financial. In the study, we found that the entire C-suite is rethinking their responsibility. Prior to the pandemic, 35% of CXOs fully embraced the responsibility to support people's holistic needs. Now, in the past 6 months, this has escalated dramatically to represent more than 50% of the CXOs. With regards to the employable need, Employees need to see concrete actions and offers from their employers that keeps them skilled for their current jobs and employable in the future. Accenture is engaged in a number of upskilling programs at consumer goods and services and retail clients, for example with Henkel, who seek to define future-proof people capabilities that put the consumer and the customer at the core. And also artificial intelligence-based skill management can help to accelerate upskilling at scale. Together with retailer Walmart and consumer goods and services conglomerate Unilever, Accenture is engaged in the World Economic Forum Consumer Industries Task Force. Through this collaborative industry effort, these organizations are working on a 10-week pilot that will serve as a proof of concept of reskilling and redeployment efforts that, once they're scaled, can help people to remain productive and employable in a transforming labor market. This is part of our responsible skilling agenda that we as Accenture have committed to pursue, and it's at the same time also an example for rapid reskilling and personal development as one of the key factors for retailers to achieve organizational agility.
Great. Thank you both so much for those insights. Let's move on to question 2. Building an agile workforce allows organizations to swiftly adapt to changing needs of customers, employees, and the market. How do you feel that workforce allocation and employee mobility impact organizational agility? Laurent, do you mind starting?
Yeah, for sure. So in the past months, from lockdown to curfew, as well as looseness of these measures, have caused challenge and headaches to retail and CPG companies, creating dilemma of what scenario to plan, to prepare for how and swiftly allocate resources where most needed. Not to mention they had to deal with extraordinary activities such as cleaning stores and production facilities, scheduling more frequent deliveries or shelf replenishment, hiring additional labor. In this context, to stay agile and reactive, industry players need to understand what level of resources they have on hand, where to reallocate them, and efficiently redeploy them. There are 2 main domains where technology was able to increase agility through allocation and mobility. The first one was continuous and dynamic resource planning based on what-if scenario. Pandemic has reinforced the need for continuous planning based on more robust scenario planning with greater coordination between HR and operation to ensure satisfying staffing level and thus business continuity. I want to take the example of our customer base. Since the emergence of the COVID-19, Workday customers have increased the amount of planning, scenario modeling, and recalibration by a factor of 15, enabling their companies to continue operation. The second point is, while continuously analyzing changes and planning for various scenarios, they need to increase efficiency of resource reallocation by streamlining and adapting operational processes. I will take the example of grocer in US, Schnuck Markets. They quickly onboarded 1,500 temporary employees with Workday, which was the equivalent of 5 times the normal hiring they were doing in the same amount of time. So they could clock in and out and get paid weekly. They also redeployed their corporate employees to have their store near their home. So they had to do it quickly to make sure that their store stayed open. But maybe Han can give her a voice on that too.
Thank you, Laurent. Actually, I would like to complete your perceptions with some of the key findings that we found in our retail consumer research that we conducted between March and July of this year to explore the impact and implications of COVID-19 in the consumer world. The research was conducted in 8 waves, and in total, we surveyed about 56,000 consumers across 19 markets. The research findings clearly showed that what consumers are buying and how they're shopping has changed dramatically as a result of the pandemic, and these new habits are here to stay. Consumers are nowadays striving to shop locally, mindfully, and more cost-consciously. 56% of consumers are shopping in neighborhood stores or buying more locally sourced products, and 80% of them are planning to continue with this behavior in the longer term. So COVID-19 has, on the one hand, fundamentally changed consumer behavior and on the other hand, largely accelerated trends like the rise of the e-commerce and new digital channels. So undoubtedly, I agree, Laurent, retail companies need real-time data insight and modeling capabilities in their skill supply and the expected skill demand to increase organizational agility and be able to respond to that particular demand. We see skills becoming a new currency in the employee experience. For example, in skills-based career pathing and skills-based project scheduling. It helps companies to better understand and leverage their employees' skills. And it also helps employees to better understand where and how to best utilize and improve their skills.
Again, terrific insight from both of you. Let's move on to the employees and let's talk a little bit about empowering and engaging the frontline workforce and how that's critical to retaining a committed workforce and how ensuring alignment with the company culture. How does communication and collaboration help ensure this? Laurent?
Yes, I would like to start with the communication aspect. The last months had a huge impact, not only on the industry, but also on its employees, not just physically or financially, but emotionally too. For many customers I had the opportunity to talk to in the last months, communication was instrumental in the response and impacted positively company efficiency and reactivity, thus the agility of the whole organization. In fact, it ensured accurate and efficient and constant up and down communication. It had three virtues in my opinion. The first, reinforced recommendation and guidelines to help minimize the transmission of disease amongst potential customers. Second was to reduce stress and create a sense of community across the company. And third, it eradicated friction and silos across the department. So the communication needed to be bidirectional. The first, top-down, to be able to provide regular, transparent, and curated information to each and every employee, such as a process change, company info on change of strategy, safety guidelines, or maybe providing the payslip in digital format or provide information on time shift. So frontline managers and employees were able to know what to expect, what their role was, and how they can help and in the end be efficient and reactive. And then it should be bottom up to understand how employees feel, what are their challenge on personal basis, what kind of support they needed to get in timely manner the relevant solution to support them. I want to take the case of Puma. During the COVID, Puma used a large panel of communication coming from video messaging, live streaming, online learning on a daily basis to communicate with their employees. They also use a lot of this learning, including providing employees with digital sessions to help them cope with the stress of combining work with homeschooling and caregiving. So Workday Mobility was the perfect medium to do that and reach the whole workforce across the organization. And adoption rate raised from 48% to 67%. But now, Han, maybe you want to complement what I just said?
Yes, thanks, Laurent. Happy to. We share a view that in times of COVID-19, we see a persisting shift towards virtual ways of working. In fact, our retail consumer research shows that 53% of all survey participants who had never worked from home before the pandemic reported that they now would like to do so more often and work from home more often in the future. This demands a stronger focus on retaining the company culture, the company communication, and the sense of belonging, which would correspond to the relational need in our net better off model. To get the basics right, we have helped a number of consumer goods and services and retail clients during the crisis to embrace virtual collaboration technology and adopting virtual ways of working and leadership, which is essential to keep employees motivated and engaged in these times of crisis. Now, when it comes to keeping employees engaged in their company culture and purpose, we have, for example, implemented an artificial intelligence-based employee relationship management approach for one of our consumer goods clients. It enables them to segment their employees according to their information needs when it comes to company purpose, culture, and a sense of belonging. Based on the tailored communication that speak to these different employee segments, and the continuous monitoring of the employee update, we have been able to refine the approach and further increase employee engagement even in times of a completely virtual setting. When it comes to increased collaboration across business units and ecosystems that we see as an additional trend rising post the pandemic, I'd again like to quote some of our findings and trends from the consumer research. In the latest data, we found that 73% of all surveyed participants consider their home as one of the top 3 preferred locations for socialization. Do-it-yourself, home decor, home cooking and baking saw a huge increase of 4 times the number of hashtags than before the pandemic. So there is a large opportunities for retailers to consider how to serve these new social and creative occasions in the home and to formalize and commercialize them through new business models and service. With regards to where and how consumers shop, we already see the trend that retail companies are starting to review the locations and formats of their stores, given the continued focus on the home for living and working and on local and neighborhood shopping. For example, Kohl's and Amazon expand their partnership to grocery with an Amazon Fresh to be opened inside a California's Kohl's location. Although the stores will be separated by a wall, the partnership is expected to drive foot traffic for Kohl's while allowing them to reduce their store sizes. And Amazon is pursuing similar partnerships with multiple retailers to expand on their side their physical grocery locations. So this example of collaboration across company boundaries is a clear example of increased organizational agility that will help retailers to strengthen their resilience in these times. Now, I'm interested to hear, Laurent, your view on increased collaboration across business units and across the ecosystem.
Yeah, collaboration is a big topic, and I want to quote Plato's on that, the Republic. Necessity is the mother of invention. It has never been so true if we look at the recent blooming of creativity and collaboration initiative. 2 examples, one on internal. John Lewis, one of our customers, has to move 8,000 employees overnight from their quarter working from home. They had to reinvent what collaboration meant inside the 4 walls of the company to continue operate virtually. The second example is more around outside of the 4 walls. You mentioned that there is more and more of, I would say, collaboration between different companies. We see that happening with customer of ours like Ocado, helping grocery retailer like Marks and Spencer to support scalability in online commerce, or Deliveroo, one of our customers, also teaming with Waitrose to offer its customer an innovative way of fast delivery service.
Great, that's great insight. I mean, I love the idea of not just looking at communication and collaboration within the organization, but looking at it outside the organization and how retailers and CPG companies are working together during this unprecedented time. Let's move to question 4. It's important for retailers to have mechanisms in place to manage, mitigate, and minimize disruption. Having access to timely and relevant data helps them to respond to changes quickly and efficiently. How does having real-time insight that can be shared amongst all stakeholders across the organization accelerate informed decision-making?
Access to real-time, accurate, and contextualized data is critical when prompting a question like where the virus is spreading and where clusters are located, where lockdown restrictions have been reinforced or loosened, where my workforce is located, what's the absenteeism rate look like. So maturity in data culture and data access democratization allows organizations to get accurate and instant insight on the global situation, to evaluate what are your options, and also improve speed and quality of decision-making in providing contextualized information of each stakeholder across the value chain. We have the example of 7-Eleven Australia. During the COVID first wave, the access to data was critical. First, to identify what were the absenteeism trends, what were the visa restrictions for employees, allowing them to monitor the situation in real time. And second, allow a quick extraction of information regarding workforce by location to allow them to put in place swift execution of business continuity measure, such as splitting team to have the right staffing across store. Anne, would you like to comment on that?
Sure, thanks, Laurent. We see that data democratization and actionable insights are nowadays not only relevant in HR, but also in other functional areas. So the latest data from our consumer research suggests that there will be a huge increase of 169% in e-commerce purchases from new or low-frequency users post the outbreak. And the vast majority of consumers who have increased their use of digital and omnichannels expect to sustain these activities into the future. In line with that trend, we also see that B2B businesses show strongly increasing expectations for digital and omnichannel interactions. But while 61% of all B2B transactions now start online, only 1/3 of CSOs are confident that the customers consistently have positive interactions in every channel they use. So sales workforces need to be equipped with deep customer insight in order to further improve their performance. And likewise, marketing employees need a deep understanding of the new consumers. So for retailers, it's now essential to retain new consumers and sustain new channels or increased levels of usage by exploring key purchase motivators such as price, payment models, support, and experience. And this is only possible with the right, real-time, and contextualized data. And while the update of HR and functional cloud platforms has varied by client in the past, we definitely see an acceleration in demand in these times because the provided analytics will help retail companies to further increase their organizational agility.
We have touched on how skills, engagement, collaboration, communication, and insights can impact organizational agility. So much insight and so much real life experiences from both of our panelists today. I'd like to thank you both for sharing these insights and expertise. As you have heard, organizational agility is key to driving long-term growth and success for retailers and consumer product good organizations. As we wrap up our session today, I'd like to ask our panelists for any closing comments or recommendations on how retailers can continuously strive for organizational agility. Laurent, do you have any last words?
Yes. So I would say, considering the context of the last months, reaching a certain level of organizational agility will be vital for retail and CPG companies to survive and thrive. Answer a question like, can you transform your head office into a flexible remote working team? Can we replace cashier-based model with seamless not checkout models? Will occur on the way of the transformation. In this context, adaptation will also come from our ability to embrace future trends through continuous innovation. On this particular aspect, cloud, SaaS, and PaaS technology will be instrumental to unleash innovation and free up company resources.
I was just going to ask Anne for your final recommendations as well.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Laurent. To just complement on your last perceptions you mentioned, I would like to highlight that once again, our consumer research has shown that retail consumers are now striving to shop more locally, mindfully, and cost-consciously. So in our view, continuous innovation must also consider global climates and sustainable aspects, because consumers are making more environmentally friendly, sustainable, or ethical purchases. So now's the moment to adopt the environmental, social, and governance practices that will allow a company to thrive again. In retail, taking carbon as an example, food and grocery alone account for 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Retailers will be well advised to take technology as a key enabler to accelerate and enable the end-to-end transformation that will make them more sustainable and at the same time more agile. Resetting expenses and operating models, optimizing the supply chain, and enabling smart and responsible sourcing and capturing the power of data, technology will make all of that possible. Thank you very much for having me.
So again, thank you so much to our panelists for helping us and sharing their expertise today. I also want to thank you all for your time and joining our session. I'd like to welcome you to visit workday.com, where you can find more information on how Workday has helped our customers in the retail and consumer product goods space and many other industries become more agile during this COVID pandemic and beyond. Thanks again.